I've shown a lot of different do-it-yourself gaming handhelds on this channel. This isn't even all of them, and they might look pretty different on the outside, but on the inside the vast majority of them are using some form of Raspberry Pi to run RetroPie. Don't get me wrong, I love the Raspberry Pi and everything that it can do, but I always love seeing something new and different come along. So that's one of the reasons that I've been excited to show you guys the Espresso from Ampersand. So before I get started, first a huge thanks to Ampersand. He sent me a kit to put together and show you guys, but then I also purchased a second kit to give away to one of you guys. So if you want a chance to win that, check out the link in the description. Okay, so the Espresso. This is a really unique little handheld for a couple of reasons that I'll get to here in just a minute. It comes as a kit, so it's definitely aimed at people who like putting these kinds of things together, or maybe you're looking for a good project to practice your soldering on. He has a really detailed and easy to follow build guide, so I'm not going to get too far into the weeds as far as how to actually put it together, but it's really straightforward and I really think it would make a good beginner project. Most of the soldering is through-hole type soldering, so again, very beginner friendly. And I actually did a soldering crash course video not too long ago, so if you're worried about that part of it, definitely check that out. I'll put a link to it in the description. The only even slightly tricky parts are a few small surface mount resistors and capacitors, and the ribbon cable for the screen that you have to attach to the PCB. But even those aren't bad if you take your time and again read through his build guide. He's got some good tips for those parts as well. The kit comes with nearly everything that you need. The only parts that are not included are an SD card, the Game Boy Pocket buttons, although it does come with the rubber membranes, and the battery, and I'll put links to where you can get all of these parts in the blog post that's in the description. It's got a 2.2-inch ILI 9341 based screen, so it's similar to several projects that you might have seen on this channel in the past. And it can play games from Game Boy, Game Boy Color, NES, Sega Master System, Game Gear, and ColecoVision. That might sound kind of limited, and it is, but I'll get to why that is in just a minute. So the first thing that really makes this project stand out is just the overall design and what the shell is made out of and how it goes together. It uses these layers of PCBs that you stack up on top of each other, and each one has cutouts for all the components that need to fit inside of it. And it's all held together by these nylon bolts, which works surprisingly well. Very similar to the stacked acrylic that Ampersand used in the Null and the Null 2 projects. The back has this raised honeycomb pattern that makes it just slightly grippy and easier to hold onto. And there's actually a pretty cool Easter egg on the other side of this board, but I'll leave that for you guys to find. So it's a super cool and unique design. The other unique thing about it has some pros and some cons to it. It doesn't use a Raspberry Pi like all those other projects that I showed earlier. Instead, it uses an ESP32 development board. The ESP32 is a chip that you normally find in Arduino type electronics projects. In fact, I've used it on a few on this channel in the past, like this daylight color changing lamp, where it uses Wi-Fi to fetch the current sunset and sunrise times for your location and time of year to match the color. And I also used it on last year's Halloween project, where it would send a text message to your phone if somebody tried to steal your candy bowl. So while it's a pretty versatile chip, it is not one that was necessarily designed for playing games. Although there have been a couple other gaming projects based on it, like the Pocket Sprite or the Odroid Go, which by the way is where the software that it's running comes from. More on that in just a second. But even though it's not as powerful as Raspberry Pi, using the ESP32 actually has a couple of advantages. One of those is battery life. Even though it's using a relatively modest 600 milliamp hour battery, it still lasted over 6 hours while playing a Game Boy game. On a Pi Zero, you'd probably be lucky to get an hour out of that size of battery. The other big advantage is that there's virtually no boot time, making it much more suitable for pulling out and playing in short bursts when you only have a couple minutes to kill, especially when you factor in the automatic save states that the software supports. With a Pi Zero based handheld, even if you're using save states, it's probably going to take you over a minute to boot up and get back into the game that you want to play. And speaking of, like I said before, it's using the same software as the Odroid Go. That means it's pretty well developed and has some nice features. The launcher kind of resembles Emulation Station. It's easy to get around and select a game, and then it gives you the option to pick up where you left off or restart the game. You can step through 4 levels of volume or mute it, and you can also toggle between a 1:1 pixel mode or scaled to fit the screen. When you're done playing, you just press the menu button to save your state, and then you can switch it off. You don't have to worry about a safe shutdown sequence or anything like that, like you would with a Raspberry Pi. And then from there, when you turn it back on, you can press the B button to back out of the launcher and get back to the last game that you played. So again, it's great for picking up and playing in short bursts. I only really had a couple of minor complaints, neither one of them are deal breakers. First is the cutout around the D-pad. It's just a little bit too big, and this is more of a cosmetic complaint because when you're sitting there playing it, it works just fine. But when it's just sitting there, or maybe it's on the shelf, there's so much room around it that it ends up looking off-center. The other thing I wasn't even sure if I should mention because it's actually addressed in the build guide, but using those stacked layers, it makes it so that the buttons can catch on them sometimes. I think part of it has to do with just making sure that all those layers of PCBs are lined up perfectly straight with each other. And it seems like playing it over time can kind of cause those to drift just a little bit, so you might have to adjust it every now and then. You can fix this for probably 95% of the time that you're playing on it by taking the time to sand down the edges of the buttons before you put it together. But again, not a huge deal. It doesn't happen all that often, especially after you sand the bottom of the buttons. Just something worth mentioning. All right, well, I think that about covers everything. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below or stop by the Discord server. I'm on there all the time, and Ampersand's actually on there as well. Also, don't forget, if you want to win one of these kits to put together yourself, check out the link in the description. As always, a big thanks to my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate you guys. You'll see their names at the end of this video. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.